Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's on one hand an incredible zechus, an incredible privilege to be able to learn Torah with all of you on this Tisha B'Av afternoon. It's of course heartbreakingly sad that once again we find ourselves in the middle of another Tisha B'Av, because I think every time we close out one Tisha B'Av, there's that euphoric feeling when Tisha B'Av is over. Part of it, a feeling of a huge weight that comes off your shoulders, a huge weight that comes off your soul. As Tisha B'Av is an incredibly difficult and overwhelming and tragic and sad day. But there's something much more profound, that on a deeper level, there's a part of me that feels, and I'd even say there's a part of me that knows that this is the last Tisha B'Av. And traumatically and tragically, we find ourselves once again here on another Tisha B'Av, on another day of mourning, another day of tragedy, another day of loss, another day of such heaviness. When we reflect on all that we have lost as a people, but yet, Kadosh Baruch Hu has a plan, and we are a people of patience. And so, if Kadosh Baruch Hu has deemed it fit that we need another Tisha B'Av of mourning and of sadness and of galus and of diaspora, then we accept it, of course, but we also pledge to ourselves, when we pledge to our God, to try to maximize this day for cathartic and comprehensive growth. We pledge to ourselves, we pledge to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to emerge from this day dramatically different, better, and more enhanced people. So that we hope, there's an ancient custom that on Matzei Tisha B'Av, communities would bury their kinnis. They would bury the kinnis. And burying the kinnis was the most incredible display of optimism and hope that this would be the last Tisha B'Av. So we should hope that Amir Hashem, we utilize this day in the right way for growth, for aliyah, so that Amir Hashem, this will truly be our last Tisha B'Av in Galus and our last Tisha B'Av of mourning. But if we have to be in mourning and we have to be in Galus, it's an incredible zechus to be able to learn with so many of you today. I know that for me, normally coming to B'nai Jacob, coming to WIT, and being able to deliver this shir to so many of you is it's going to sound strange, but it's a highlight of my Tisha B'Av, and that it gives me incredible chizuk, incredible strength to see just so many women coming out, coming to learn, coming to grow, coming to tap into the energy of this day. So of course this year is a little bit different, and so although we can't be together physically, it's a great zchus at least that we're able to come together on Zoom, to be able to come together virtually, to be able to again tap into the energy of this day. So our title for today's shir is Broken, Battered, and Better, the Power of Tisha B'Av. And the shir is dedicated La'aliyas Nishmas Chaim Yishayo Zichron Livracha Ben Yosef. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey, actually a fascinating dimension of Tisha B'Av that I had never really seen, really never seen until this year. So take a look at number one, an incredible medrash. So the medrash writes in Yalkut Shimoni, Amar Rabbi Levi, B'chol chodesh ve'chodesh shebekayitz, bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu litein liYisrael moed. It's actually a fascinating idea. In every one of the summer months, Rabbi Levi said, the original plan was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to go ahead and give us a Yom Tiv. So each and every one of the summer months was going to have a Yom Tiv. So for example, B'Nisan, really Nisan is the beginning of the summer months. B'Nisan, Nasan Lahem Pesach. So Nisan we have Pesach. B'Iyar, Nasan Lahem Pesach Katan. In the month of Iyar is Pesach Sheni. B'Sivan, Nasan Lahem Atzeres. And Sivan, of course, is the month of Shavuos. So listen to this. B'Tamuz, Haya B'Daito Litein Lahem Moed Gadol. So what happened? It was Kadosh Baruch Hu's plan that Tammuz was also going to have an incredible Yom Tiv. Tammuz was also going to have a Yom Tiv in it, right? But what happened? However, Asu Egel, Batal, Tammuz, Av, Ve'elul. But as a result of the Egel, a golden calf, and then as a result of other terrible events that occurred, what happened? So Tammuz, Av, and Elul were batal, they were negated, no Yomim Tovim during these days. Uba Tishrei upar lahem Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim b'Chag. So here's what happened. Originally there was supposed to be a Yom Tiv in Tammuz, there was supposed to be a Yom Tiv in Av, and a Yom Tov in Elul. But then because of the sin of the golden calf, so the sin of the golden calf it changed everything. Because remember again, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down on the 17th of Tammuz, he breaks the luchos. He saw they built the calf. Then 40 days up, 40 days down. There's a whole bunch. It's 120 days. When does Moshe Rabbeinu finally come back down with the last of the luchos on Yom Kippur? So essentially, it should have been a Yom Tiv on Tammuz, Av, and Elul, but everything was pushed into Tishrei. This is why Tishrei, interestingly enough, has 3 Yomim Tovim: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. But that was not the original plan. It sounds like the original plan was 1 Yom Tov in Tammuz, 1 Yom Tov in Av, 1 Yom Tov in Elul, and maybe Tishrei has nothing. So if you look at number 2, the Chidah writes, Emar Me'ata. He says, you see something amazing from here, which is, Shalafi ha'emes, Rosh Hashanah haya b'Tammuz, v'Yom Kippurim b'Av, u'b'Sukkos v'Elul. In the original plan that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had for creation, Rosh Hashanah was going to be in the month of Tammuz, Yom Kippur was going to be in the month of Av, and Sukkot would have been in the month of Elul. So understand what the Chidah is saying. The Chidah is saying again that the sin of the golden calf, by the way, the sin of the golden calf was the first of a number of Averos that kind of derailed our national trajectory. In that same category, of course, is the sin of the spies. But it was the sin of the golden calf that changed the trajectory of the month. It changed the fabric of time. But what's so striking to me about this Chidah, and I literally never saw this Chidah before, is this idea that Yom Kippur was supposed to be in the month of Av. And I'll tell you something even more dramatic. Yom Kippur is the 10th of Tishrei. Tisha B'Av, of course, again, is the 9th of Av. But the morning practices spill into the 10th of Av as well. In a regular year, this year it's different because the 10th of Av is Erev Shabbos, but it spills into the 10th of Av, which tells you something amazing. That on some level, this day that we are observing now, this day of Tisha B'Av, it was supposed to be Yom Kippur. It was supposed to be Yom Kippur. Now you understand what that means. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Yom Kippur is a day of Slicha v'Chapar, it's a day of forgiveness. Yom Kippur is a day of atonement. Yom Kippur is a day of Tara, of purity. And it was supposed to be today. It was supposed to be today. This day that we're mourning, today, tomorrow, this day that we're mourning, it was supposed to be Yom Kippur. But the events of our historical past fundamentally changed the nature of these days. So Tisha B'Av, the day that was supposed to be Yom Kippur, instead becomes a day of Avelos, a day of Tsar, a day of incredible sadness. So you'll ask, what happened? So the Medrash tells us, so first of all, this is important because if nothing else, what this does is it frames Tisha B'Av in a different way. Tisha B'Av is a day that is filled with such dramatic holiness. Today we spoke about this morning during Kinnis. Tisha B'Av is a day that has all of these sparks of holiness, but those sparks, unfortunately, have been somewhat eclipsed by the terrible events of this day. But in the original master plan, in the original plan of creation, today was Yom Kippur. Today was a day of forgiveness. Today was a day of holiness. Today was a day of celebration. And then events occurred that fundamentally altered the nature of this day. So I understand. So Rosh Hashanah was supposed to be in Tammuz. Rosh Hashanah was supposed to be in Tammuz, but that couldn't happen because of the sin of the golden calf. Something happens in Av that takes away Tisha B'Av's ability to be Yom Kippur. So what happened in the month of Av that changed the nature of this day? So we know the Torah tells us in number 3, Vatisa kol ha'ida vayitnu es kolam. So the community raised their voices, vayitnu es kolam. They shouted, vayifkua am balaylahu. So just to give you context, this is the sin of the spies. The Miraculim come back from their reconnaissance mission in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, again, the intention was to send them, for them to come back and deliver a beautiful, glowing report, a happy report, a simchadik report, a report that would fuel optimism and excitement about entry into the land. But of course, they come in and they deliver a disastrous report, a slanderous report maligning the land, which ultimately leads to a maligning of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately, leads to a maligning of Moshe, which ultimately leads to a maligning of none other than God Himself. So they come back and they cry. Vayilonu al Moshe v'al Aaron kol b'nei Yisrael. They begin to complain about Moshe, about Aaron. Vayomru aleim kol ha'ida lu masnu be'eretz Yisrael oba midbar hazeh lu masnu. And they say something. Every time Klal Yisrael says this, it defies comprehension. If only we would have died in the desert, right? If only we would have died, in Mitzrayim, right? It would be better to die in Egypt than it would have been to die in this desert. So once again, the Miraculim come back, deliver their disastrous report. Klal Yisrael accepts their report, and Klal Yisrael falls back to their commonly held assertion. Whenever they're in a stressful time, they always go back, Egypt, 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 Egypt. Like Egypt was some type of utopia. Like Egypt, they threw the babies into the Nile. There was subhuman treatment for 210 years. It's amazing how we engage in historical revisionism. So every time they encountered a stressful situation, let's just go back to Egypt. And dear friends, when did this occur? All of this occurred, the Gemara tells us, on Tisha B'Av. As the Gemara says in number 4, B'Tisha B'Av nigzar alavosenu shleikan subaris. Ksiv, Vatisa kol ha'ida vayitnu es kolam, vayifku ha'am balayla hahu. The spies deliver their report. They come back, Klal Yisrael accepts the report, and they begin to cry. They begin to cry. And what night was it that they began to cry? Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, number 4, Osa Laila, Leil Tisha B'Av Haya. That night was the night of Tisha B'Av. So last night, that very night, last night, thousands of years ago, is the very night when the spies came back, delivered the report about Eretz Yisrael. Our ancestors accepted the report and began to cry. We can't believe that we were duped. We can't believe that we fell for it. We can't believe that we left the utopia of Egypt to come and die anonymous deaths in the deserts. We can't overtake the land. It's impossible, and they cry. So says the Gemara, Amar Lema Kadosh Baruch Hu, Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam, v'ani kovea lachem b'chiyah ledoros. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, you cried for nothing. Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam. You cried for nothing. I will go ahead and cause you to cry for many generations to come. And there's an obvious question on this. You know what this sounds like a little bit, and I'm probably not so proud of it. But it sounds like what every parent is sometimes tempted to say when your child is having a tantrum. Oh, you're crying? You're crying? This is what you're crying? I'm crying. I'll give you something to cry about. It's probably not politically correct parenting to say that kind of thing today. But Lamaisa, even if you haven't said it, every parent at some point in time thinks it. What are you crying about? Your life is perfect. You have everything. I'll give you something to cry about. So that's human parents. Because at the end of the day, we have a breaking point. At the end of the day, I have a certain point where I just can't handle it anymore. But this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. It's such a strange divine response. Because you cried for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. It almost seems punitive. Now, maybe it is punitive, and maybe that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying. The Rebbe Shalom was telling Klal Yisrael that unfortunately we behaved like a nation of ingrates. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I've given you everything. I took you out of Egypt. I split the sea. I bring man down to your homes every day. I give you water in the desert. I've helped you vanquish all of your enemies. Everything is going according to plan. So the first time there's a hiccup, the first time that you get a little bit nervous, that there's a stronger nation in front of you, that's it. You fall apart. That's it. Suddenly again, nothing's good. So it could be that maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kiviyachol was upset. Maybe better than upset, hurt. Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam. So you cry for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. But I'll tell you what the problem is. The Rebbe Shalom loves us, and he cares about us, and we are special to him. And this is not the way that God would normally handle us. So there must be something deeper that's unfolding over here. It's true, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could get upset, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could get angry, but what a strange way to speak to us. Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam. You cried for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. So perhaps to understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, we have to understand the real nature of the mistake. What happened by the Meraglim? What was the sin? What did they do? So if you take a look at number 5, so the pasuk says, "Vayisapru lo." So remember, this is by the Meraglim, by Yomru. But so now the Meraglim are coming, retelling the account of their spying mission, their reconnaissance mission to Klal Yisrael. Vayomru banu ala aretz asher shalachtanu v'gam zavas chalavu dvashi v'zepriya. So the Meraglim come back. They say, you know what? They were right. The truth is, it is a land that flows with milk and honey. It is true. It's a land that flows with milk and honey. But at the end of the day, Efes means but. Ki az ha'am hayoshe ba'aretz v'arim bitzuros gidolos ma'od v'gam yilidei ha'anak ra'inu sham. But, what's the but? The but is there are mighty nations who live there. Mighty nations who live there. Amalek Yoshev Eretz HaNegev. V'achiti v'ayevusi Amori Yoshev Bahar. V'aknani Yoshev al Hayam v'al Yad HaYarden. So you're not going to believe who's there. Amalek is there, the Yevusi is there, the Chiti is there, the Amori is there, the Kanani is there. Too much. Too much. So again, is the land beautiful? Yeah, the land is exceptional. Is the land incredible? 100%. The land is magnificent, but it's too difficult for us to do. The nations who dwell there are too overwhelming. They're too strong. We know who we are. We know who they are, and it's impossible for us to overtake them. So what was happening over here? It's very simple. They were scared. They were scared. When the Meraglim come back, you see, because think about this just a moment. The Klal Yisrael had already faced down other nations, right? We had already done that before. We had gone to war with Sichon and with Og, who were some of the mightiest Canaanite kings. They went to war with mighty nations already, and they were successful in their battles against these nations. So what happened here? What is that Ephes? You know, Ephes means but you know what Ephes also means? Ephes also means a nothing. A nothing. When we went into the land, we felt like a nothing. These people were so strong. They were so overwhelming. You know, a little bit later on, the Meraglim say, we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. Now, you can make a statement that you feel like a grasshopper, but you don't know what you look like in someone else's eyes. They went in, and they were scared. They were scared. The Meraglim went in, and they were just scared stiff of what they saw. Now, is it legitimate to get scared? Of course. Fear is an instinct. Fear is an action. Reaction. Fear is an emotion. It is absolutely normal to get scared. But the shaila is, what do you do with your fear? You see, what happened over here by the Meraglim was something so overwhelming, yet something so simple. The Meraglim come back, and the Meraglim are scared because they feel that the nations who dwell in Canaan are stronger than they are. They feel that the nations who dwell in Canaan are simply bigger than they are. And there is no way for us to overcome them. We're scared. Now, no one ever likes to say that they're scared. Instead, what we do is, what the Meraglim did, is they made a statement of fact. We can't conquer them. What do you mean we can't conquer them? Did you speak to God? Did you speak to Moshe? Did you speak to Aaron? Did you speak to anyone else? No. We just know that we can't conquer them. We can't conquer them. They were scared. They were scared. And the Meraglim became paralyzed by this fear. That fear overtook them. That fear paralyzed them to the point that they say to Am Yisrael, we cannot go. Efes ki az ha'am hayosheba. We can't go. They're just too powerful. They're just simply too powerful. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say to them? The Rebbe Shalom is not punishing Klal Yisrael. He's not saying, oh, you cried for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling them something so profound. Atem bechisem bechia shalchinam. If you allow yourself to cry, and you allow yourself to be fearful and paralyzed by fear, which is not real, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to them, Ani kovea lachem bechia ledoros. I could predict that you will cry and you will be paralyzed by fear for many generations to come. See, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Klal Yisrael that ultimately, if you allow your fear to paralyze you, and if you allow your fear to cause you to run away from life's challenges, then you will always run and you will always cry. The Rebbe Shalom is not making a statement like an angry parent. The Rebbe Shalom is making a statement that says, I'm telling you about your behavior. Atem bechisem bechia shalchinam. If you're going to cry over nothing, what are you crying about? I'm God. I'm here. I'm here. And the same way that I helped you every step of the way until now, I'll help you now also. I know that they're powerful. I understand that they're powerful. I absolutely understand that they're what to be feared. I understand all of that. But at the end of the day, there is nothing for you to be fearful of. But if you're going to allow your fear to paralyze you now, when there's not really anything to fear, then I dread, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you're going to be a people who become paralyzed by fear for many generations to come. But the truth is, this is not the first example that we have of being paralyzed by fear. The truth is, we see this already in the beginning of creation. We see this by Adam and Chava. If you take a look at number 7, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, an incredible, overwhelming medrash. The medrash writes, "V'kelev shehaya mishamer tzono shel Hevel, haya mishamer nivlaso mikol chayas asad mikol of hashamayim." So the medrash writes as follows. The medrash says that, when Cain killed Hevel, so Hevel's body is lying there, and Hevel's sheepdog, his sheepdog was standing watch over the body, that the birds and the animals should not come and pick away at the body. V'haya Adam v'ozro yoshvim ubochim umisablim alav. And Adam and Chava were sitting there by the body. They were crying. They were mourning. V'lo hayu yicholim malasos shelo hayu nogin kavura. They had no idea what to do. They had no idea what to do with Hevel's body. Orev echad shemes re'eu amar elmod la'adam ze malasos. So there was a raven that came, and the raven said, "I'll show Adam what to do." Ma'asa, the raven's spouse, the raven's mate, had died. So the raven said, "I'll show Adam what to do." Ma'asa, natal re'ehu v'chafar ba'aretz v'tamnu le'neim v'kavru. The raven took its mate, made a hole in the earth, put the body of the deceased raven inside and covered it over. Amar Adam ka'orev hazeh ani oseh. And Adam says, "I'll do the same thing as this raven. Natal es nivlaso shel Hevel, v'chafar ba'aretz v'tamna." Adam took Hevel's body, he made a hole in the ground, and he buried Hevel in the ground. And I've always thought, when you look at this medrash, there's something so much more profound. The medrash paints a picture. Hevel is dead. Adam and Chava sitting there, they don't know what to do. Now, think about this for just a moment. Adam knew where he came from, right? Adam, one of the reasons Adam is called Adam is because of Adama. He knows where he comes from. He knows ultimately, again, that he comes from the ground and that ultimately goes back to the ground. But he doesn't know how to bury his son. Now, while it's true, no one had ever died, so this was not necessary up until this point in time. But at the end of the day, Adam didn't know what to do. He had no idea. Adam and Chava neither had any idea. I think what the Medrash is trying to highlight over here is fear paralysis. You see, Adam and Chava did not know what the death of their son meant. What does this mean for our family? What does this mean for Cain, the son who is the murderer? What does it mean for Hevel, our son who was cut down in the prime of his life? What does it mean for the continuity of the human race? How do we go forward? What do we do? What does this mean for us as parents if this is what one son did to another? So you see the image that the Medrash paints? V'haya Adam v'azro yoshvim ubochim umisavlim alav. Adam and Chava are sitting there. What a tragic picture, what a tragic image. Adam and Chava are sitting there by the body of their murdered child, and they don't know what to do. V'lo hayu yicholim ma la'asos. We don't know what to do because fear, and Adam and Chava were filled with fear. What's going to happen to Cain? What's going to happen to us? And fear, what's going to happen to Hevel? What does this mean about Hevel? Where does he go? What does he do? Neshama, everything else. And so what happened when they were overcome by fear? They were paralyzed. They sat by Hevel's body, not knowing what to do until the raven came along and taught them this message. See something amazing. Do you know what happened on Tisha B'Av? Do you know what happened on this day thousands of years ago? The Meraglim weren't bad people. The Meraglim were not Rishon. The proof to that is the Meraglim were chosen because they were amongst the most righteous of all of Klal Yisrael. The Meraglim were chosen because they were the holiest. They were the most pious. But they come into Canaan, and what happens? They come back and they're shaking in their sandals. They're shaking. They're filled with fear. So what do, Meraglim, in the midst of fear, shut down, paralyzed. We can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. Adam and Chava, fearful over everything that the murder of their son means. What do? Shut down, fearful, sitting there crying, sobbing, immobile. I don't know what to do. And I think many times this is the natural reaction to fear. Fear is a paralyzing emotion. When you're scared of something, you know the expression of a deer in headlights? Isn't it incredible? Right? Again, yeah, if we live in an area, there's a lot of deer. So sometimes it's amazing. Like you have to be so careful because you would think that the deer would avoid cars at all expense, but they don't. Right? They don't. Sometimes they just dart out, and sometimes even if they see it, for whatever the reason, they just freeze. So there's this expression like a deer in headlights. Doesn't make sense. The headlights are coming. Why don't you move? Because fear is a paralyzing emotion. There is a incredible book that I quoted this morning a lot from in Kinnis. The title of the book is "Hope is Last to Die." So it's a biography written by Helena Birnbaum, and Mrs. Birnbaum was an 11-year-old girl when the Holocaust started. She was an 11-year-old. She was born in 1929. She was an 11-year-old girl who was living in Warsaw at the start of the war. And she writes about her experiences during the war. She was in the Warsaw Ghetto, then she was in Majdanek, in Auschwitz, in Ravensbrück, an incredible ordeal. By the time the war is over, she's 15 years old, an incredible 16 years old, an incredible ordeal for her. And she chronicles her life as an 11-year-old child going through the war. And I mentioned this during Kinnis. I apologize if anyone you might hear a little bit of repeat, but I said I was very drawn to this book because I have an 11-year-old daughter. And to think about that what was happening to this girl was a girl, an age I could relate to, because I come home every day, Baruch Hashem, and I get to see a beautiful, vibrant, happy 11-year-old girl. And to see what this little girl had to go through was dramatically amazing. So she describes this scene. I didn't put this on your sheet, but I'll read it to you. She describes the scene of what was happening in the Warsaw Ghetto. So they were liquidating the ghetto. They were rounding up the people into the Umschlagplatz, into the train station area. But there was a delay, so they sent everybody, they locked people up in various buildings over the course of the night. So she describes a night in one of these buildings. And she says as follows. She says, I remember, so she's there with her mother and with her brother. She's there with her mother, with her brother. I remember a stormtrooper. So you have to appreciate, this is an 11-year-old girl. I see a stormtrooper pushing his way into the room with some empty bottles in his hand. He stamped loudly on the floor with iron-tipped heels of his shining top boots. He was armed, as they all were, and like his colleagues, he demanded money and jewelry. Nobody answered. People only shrank further back, pressing to the floor and walls. Then the stormtrooper announced he was going to throw the bottles at us. Anyone hit must rise, and if the individual did not hand over money, he would bitterly regret it. He raised one hand, aimed the bottle. My mother covered her face with her hands and crouched over to protect me. I closed my eyes, clenched my fist. I was too terrified to move or even turn my head, lest I draw the stormtrooper's eyes on myself. I waited in terrible tension for what would happen. Whom would the bottle hit? There was complete silence in the room. It was as though nobody in the crowd was breathing. Then came the sound of smashing glass, someone's uncertain steps, and the blow of a horsewhip, regular as the ticking of a clock. I kept my eyes shut, not wanting to know who the victim was this time. I did not want to hear and to put my fingers in my ears. I nestled close to my mother and she crouched over me. Then I felt her body trembling with spasmodic sobbing. At first, I did not understand why my mother, always so self-controlled, had suddenly broken down. I opened my ears. A dead silence reigned in the room. Only the horsewhip went on striking, though the man under torture did not even groan or beg for mercy. Then I opened my eyes, and I looked up to see why my mother was sobbing so bitterly, though without a sound. and I saw it was my brother, Hilik. The bottle had hit him. He had no money or anything that might have saved him. The stormtrooper was beating him sadistically and cold-bloodedly. He kept striking Hilik about the head. He smashed Hilik's spectacles and bloodied his face. Hilik stood there as though he did not feel the blows at all. He did not utter the slightest groan, and he endured this to the end of the bestial torture. When the stormtrooper finally got tired or bored, for I doubt whether Hilik's calmness and his endurance impressed the bandit. However, he spared my brother's life. Hilik crawled over to us on all fours, with his face bloodied, blind without his spectacles, his head splitting. When the stormtrooper went out, Hilik did not utter a word, merely crouched on the floor beside my mother and Hella, wiping off the blood that poured from his wound with a handkerchief. And I was so struck by this account because the little girl crouching under her mother, and what's her first reaction when there's fear? I did not want to see, I did not want to hear. So she put her fingers in her ears, closed her eyes, and just buried herself in her mother. Because that's what fear does. Fear is a paralyzing emotion. I just want to shut down. I don't want to hear, I don't want to see. So the Meraglim, they don't want to hear, they don't want to see what's happening. And let's just go back. Let's just go back to Mitzrayim. And Adam and Chava, we don't know what to do. So they just shut down. And all they do is they just cry. They just sit there and they just cry over the loss of their beloved son. And that's all. That's all. Ultimately, again, they are able to do. To cry and to mourn for that which has been lost. For that which has been lost. So the question, of course, becomes, so what do we do? So what do we do? So now we understand this incredible dynamic of fear. And so the question becomes, let me just get my sheet. Sorry, I just took the wrong source sheet. Give me one moment, excuse me. And so the question becomes, what do we do with this dramatic fear? What do we do with this traumatic fear? We see it's paralyzing. We see that it's overwhelming. So how do we deal with it? So I think the reality is as follows. People are fearful. I'm sorry, you'll just give me a moment. My notes seem to have gotten a little bit mixed up here. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. So we see that fear is this overwhelming emotion that prevents us from moving forward. It prevented the Meraglim from moving forward. It prevented Adam and Chava from moving forward. And as a child, although it's justified, it prevented a little child from just want to shut down, close my ears, close my eyes, and move forward. And the truth is, this dynamic of fear is something that impacts and really has a dramatic influence upon all of us. Because we're all scared of something. Everyone's scared of something. Some people are scared of failure. You know, there's an incredible medrash. If you take a look at number 7 on your sheet. So the medrash writes, I'm sorry, not number 7, number 8. So the medrash writes, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa, v'hinei tov ma'od. Kadosh Baruch Hu saw all that he did, and it was very good. Vayerev vayvoker yom hashishi. So it's a medrash that we're all familiar with. So there's an incredible medrash rabbah, pasuk we're all familiar with. The pasuk in Bereshis Rabbah says number 9, B'sarasos Rabbi Meir matzah kasuv. In the drush of Rabbi Meir it says, V'hinei tov ma'od, v'hinei tov maves. What's tov ma'od? So again, we normally translate this as tov ma'od is death. Tov ma'od is death. So what does this mean? Tov ma'od, that's what it means. HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw everything that he did, and it was tov ma'od, it was great, and great means death. So yes, on a basic level, this is not our topic, but on a basic level, sometimes it's understood that tov ma'od represents death because mortality is a blessing. Without mortality, there would not be a drive to accomplish. Without mortality, there would not be a drive to do. And mortality is Tov Mov, the notion that life is a finite, non-renewable resource. Pushes us to accomplish, pushes us to do, pushes us to be the most we can be now and not to wait. But there's a deeper understanding, says the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, that people who look for Tov Ma'od in life, ultimately, again, it's a death sentence. What does this mean? You see, so many of us are scared of failure. Tisha B'Av is a very introspective day. And so many of us are scared of failure. What do I mean by that? That we're unwilling to take chances. And I don't mean reckless chances. I mean responsible chances. But we're unwilling to push ourselves. We're unwilling to venture into the unknown. We're unwilling to take advantage of opportunities which present themselves. We're unwilling to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. So we live a life of mediocrity. We live a life tethered. You see this all the time. People do it in their career. They're unwilling to push themselves to the next level. You see it in relationships. I'm unwilling to make myself vulnerable. And therefore, again, allow the relationship to grow because I'm so scared. I'm so scared that I'm going to fail. Do you know what people often do? You see, no one likes to say they're scared of failure. So instead, more often, what do people do? I'm not scared of failure. I'm just a perfectionist. So I never like to do things unless, of course, I know 100% I can get it right. So the truth is, if you live life like that, there's very little you can do with absolute certainty. Pretty much the only thing you can do with certainty is if you decide you're going to eat a bagel after the fast, unless for some reason you don't have bagels in your house. So pretty much you could do that with certainty. But other than that, there's nothing that you could do with certainty in life. We go through life and we're so scared of failure. I'm so scared of failing. And so I hide behind this image of perfectionism. Well, do you know what happens when you hide behind perfectionism? Vayar Elokim es kala asher asavi ni tov ma'od. So there are people who, I'm only going to do something if it could be tov ma'od. Well, if you're a tov ma'od person, you know what the Medrash says? Tov ma'od is maves. Tov ma'od is death. Because if everything in life has to be perfect, if you're unwilling to push yourself into the realm of uncertainty for growth and for self-actualization, that is a death sentence. If all you want to do in life is the stuff you could do tov ma'od, very well, perfect, that's maves. That's death. You know, the Medrash relates that the Ribono Shel Olam created hundreds of thousands of worlds before he created ours. Hundreds of thousands of worlds, the Medrash writes, before he created ours. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, what does that mean? What does that mean? And why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu create hundreds of thousands of worlds? HaKadosh Baruch Hu could get it right on the first time. What's the pshat that he had to create hundreds of thousands of worlds until he finally got it right? Se'elamah, you begin to see. The Rabbi Soloveitchik says something amazing. The Ribono Shel Olam could absolutely get it right on the first time. But he knew that we can't. And so what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He modeled for us what it means to fail and to try again. And to fail and to try again. At the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have created the world once, but instead he allows himself to model failure for us, to show that it's okay to try and fail. It's okay not always to be successful. No one is always successful. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to show that even Kiviyachol, the Ribono Shel Olam himself, is not always successful. He had to make hundreds of thousands of worlds until he got to ours. So many of us are fearful of failing. And then there's a second kind of fear. And this is a fear of success. You'll say to yourself, what does it mean? Who's fearful of success? So many of us. Because if you succeed at something, that shows that you have an ability. That shows that you have koach. But if I have koach and if I have ability, then doesn't that create responsibility? You know what? I don't like not having any expectations. I like not having pressure. So we fear success. Because if I'm successful, it shows I'm capable. And if I'm capable, that creates expectations. And expectations create a certain level of responsibility. So sometimes I'm scared of failing. Sometimes I'm scared of success. Sometimes I have a fear because at the end of the day, I just feel like nothing. At the end of the day, I just feel like I'm not really worthwhile. Like I don't really possess any rebellion. And this happens for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because of growing up, we were never made to feel special. Sometimes we suffered setback or tragedy or trauma. Sometimes there were people who hurt us and put us down and made us feel simply like nothing. And so I fear everything in life. Everything is scary and everything is overwhelming because I just don't feel like I'm significant. I just don't feel like I really matter in any substantive way. And so we have fear on so many different levels. A fear of failure, a fear of success, a fear of nothingness. And that fear often paralyzes us in life. That fear often keeps us rooted in place, and that fear often keeps us from moving forward. So the shaila, the question is, how do we deal with our fear? So if you take a look in number 10, there's an amazing pasuk. And the pasuk says so beautifully, Hazorim bedima berina yiktzoru. Pasuk kuf chaf of Shira Malas. I ended off Kinnis with the beginning of this pasuk, and now we're going to continue in this parak, continue in this chapter for this shir as well. Hazorim bedima berina yiktzoru. And it always struck me, what does this mean? What does this phrase mean? Those who sow with tears will reap with song. So the Radak says in number 11, bedima mipnei tzaras hagalos. Because of the tsar, because of the suffering of galus, so the Radak understands that the dima, the tears, refer to the suffering. That suffering paves the way for simcha. Suffering, our collective suffering over the last 2,000 years, paves the way for incredible joy. Okay? The Metzudas David says something amazing. Take a look at number 12, and this is really spectacularly amazing. Writes the Metzudas David, Hazorim, Asher Hazorim b'makom hanogov hahu, halozaru b'dima, b'chashvam penlo titzmach v'yafsidu hazara. Says the Metzudas David, what does it mean to sow with tears? Sow with tears. You know when you sow with tears, says the Metzudas David? When you come to a place and you want to plant something, but the problem is I don't know if there's going to be enough water. So I'm not sure. Should I plant? Should I not plant? So I make a decision to plant. I go forward with the planting even though I don't know what's going to happen. And I cry and I cry and I cry because I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. Is what I plant going to sprout or not? People who plant like that, people who plant even when they're not sure if they're going to be successful, and they cry because they're so unsure, Berina yiktzoru. Those people will go ahead and harvest with joy. Do you hear what the Metzudas David is describing? A person who comes to a plot of land and he has a seed and he knows he needs to put the seed in the ground, but he's not sure, is there enough water to cause the seed to grow or not? But he decides, you know what? I just got to do it. I got to put the seed in the ground. I have to face my fears, put the seed in the ground. But I'm so unsure. I'm scared. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of succeeding. I'm scared because I feel like I'm a no one. And I cry and I cry and I cry because my fears are scary. So I find the courage to put the seed in the ground. But I'm crying all the way through and I'm waiting. Is the seed going to sprout? Not going to sprout. A person who finds the courage to plant the seed even when he's not sure if it's going to grow, has zorim bedima, and he cries because he's trying to face his fears, but he's so scared. Barina yiktzoru. Such a person will harvest the sapling. Such a person will harvest the growth. Says the Metzudas David, Do you want to know how to face your fears? How to face your fears? How to own your fears? You move through them. You simply move through them. You see, fear, as we said before, is a paralyzing emotion. And whether I'm the Meraglim, or I'm Adam Chava, or 11-year-old Helena Birnbaum, when I'm scared, my reflexive reaction is shut down. Shut down. The problem with shutting down, when you allow your fears to paralyze you, is you become mired in your present. You become mired in mediocrity. You become mired in your current situations. So you don't go into your promised land, and you don't know how to take care of your deceased child, and you're sitting there huddling underneath your mother. But I'm so scared. So what do I do with my fears? And David HaMelech once again tells us, because David HaMelech has all the life answers. Hazorim bedima. You see, that seed represents potential. That seed represents ability. And again, the placement of the seed into the earth means a willingness to take a step forward. But I'm not sure. There's not enough water. Is the seed going to sprout? And I'm crying, and because I'm so unsure of myself, because I'm so scared. Because, every single time you have to confront fear, it brings back all of your past fears. So it brings back all of your past fears. Why should I try again? I failed so many times. Or why should I try again? I'm so scared of people having expectations of me, or me having expectations of myself. Or why should I try? I'm a nothing. My mother told me I'm a nothing. My father told me I'm a nothing. My Rebbe told me I'm a nothing. My spouse told me I'm a nothing. Everyone told me I'm a nothing. So I'm a nothing. So why should I put the seed in the ground? But I find the koach, says David HaMelech, Hazorim B'dima, and I'm crying. And those are tears of fear. But I choose to face my fears. I choose to confront them. No, I'm not going to be sidelined in life. I'm going to put the seed into the ground. I'm going to put the seed into the ground. And all the while, I'm going to work the soil. I'm going to water it. And I'm watering it with my tears of uncertainty. A person who exhibits that level of life courage, that person, Barina Yiktsoro. When you find the courage in life to confront your fears, and you water your endeavors with your tears of fear and your tears of uncertainty, such a person will be successful in life. Only you can allow your fears to sideline you. Only you could allow your fears to paralyze you. Only you could allow your fears to keep you mired in mediocrity. Hazorim Bedima. But if you find the courage to plant your seed in the field of uncertainty, to move forward, to move into your fears, Barina Yiktsoro, you will harvest the growth of your endeavors with incredible joy. And in fact, if you go back to the story of the Meraglim, remember, I put it on the sheet, but you don't have to go back, but I'll just tell you it outside. When the Meraglim give their disastrous report to Klal Yisrael, so what does Kalev say? So they say, we can't do it. The pasuk says, Vayas Kalev esa'am, Kalev silenced the people, and then what happened? Vayas Kalev esa'am el Moshe vayomer alo na'alev yarashnu osa ki achol nuchala. So Kalev silences the people, and he says to the people, don't worry, we can do it. And the Piazetzna, of Klonomis Kalma Shapir, the Piazetzna says, I don't understand. What kind of answer is that? Kalev, what are you saying? You hear what's happening? You see, the reason why the people believed the Meraglim was because the Meraglim were not making stuff up, right? Meaning what the Meraglim said was truthful. The people are powerful. The people are overwhelming. There's no way we could confront them. The Meraglim weren't lying. They weren't making up stories. So Kalev comes along and says, no, don't worry about it. We're going to be just fine. Alo na'alev yarashnu osa. Let's go. Ki achol nuchala. Because we can. And says the Piazetzna, what are you talking about? Kalev, if you want to go ahead and debate the Meraglim say we can't. And you want to say we can. And then Kalev, you're going to say, I'm going to tell you why we can. We can do it for the following reasons. Because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. Fine. Say, go ahead and give strategy. No, if we come in the land through the south, through the north, through the east, through the west, we'll take them by surprise, we'll do this. But what does Kalev do? Kalev's like giving like a pep talk. We can do it. What does that mean? And the Piazetzna writes something so incredibly amazing. He writes, I'm just going to read to you. He says, Gam b'shoshin roach chas v'shalom shum mavo al pi seichel v'derech hateva liyishuaso Ya'amin b'Hashem she'ushir v'yischazek b'menoso b'tchono. Kalev says the Piaget was teaching us an incredible lesson. Sometimes you just have to say, yes, I can. Sometimes you just have to say, yes, I can. Kalev was saying the same thing that David HaMelech was saying. Hazorim b'dima. Sometimes you just have to, there's not enough water. Why are you planting the seed there? Maybe you will have enough, maybe you won't have enough. Hazorim b'dima. Sometimes you just have to put the seed of potential into the fertile soil. You just got to move forward. You just got to say, yes, I can. I will not be paralyzed by my fear. That's what Kalev was saying to the Meraglim. That's what he was saying to Klal Yisrael. That's what the Piaget was saying. Sometimes the Yid, sometimes the Jew just has to say, yes, I can. Yes, I can. I don't even know how I can. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I know that I can't be paralyzed. I know that I can't just stay here. I know that I can't let the pain overtake me. I know that I can't live my life with my eyes closed, my fingers in my ears, and huddling underneath my mother. I know that I have to move forward. How? Sometimes I don't know what the how is, but I just know that I have to move. I have to accomplish. I have to put the seed in the soil, and if I need to water it with my tears, then that's what I'll do. Alo na'ala v'arashnu osa ki achal nuchala. The Piagetzna, the Heilige Piagetzna Hashem Yikom Damo, who was talking in the Warsaw Ghetto, who was telling Jews in the years of the war, sometimes you just have to believe that we can. How are we going to survive? We just have to believe that we can. How are we going to make it through another day? You just have to believe that you can. But we're so scared. We're so scared. Put your seed in the ground. Water it with your tears of uncertainty and move yourself forward. Sometimes the only way to deal with fear is to face it and to walk headfirst into it. You know, in this book that I quoted before, Hope is Last to Die, Suelina Berenbaum writes, she writes in the end of the book, I spoke about this during Kinnis as well, she writes about a visit that she made back to the camps in 1986. So on June 15th, 1986, she went back to visit Majdanek in Auschwitz. And I want to read to you part of her account that happened there because I find it to be so dramatically amazing and speaks to this very theme. I haven't written about Majdanek, she writes, but the visit there will never be erased from my memory. I was finally there. I cried my heart out for all those years. I've never cried like that. I sat on the ground before the gas chamber and screamed to the heavens. So last summer, I had the privilege to go with a group and to see Majdanek, so I understand what she's describing, the area right before the gas chambers. She sat down on the ground and she's crying. And she explains, why did she sit down on the ground? She just can't move. How am I going to go in there? How should I walk in there, that place where my loved ones lost their life? How should I go into that place where ultimately so many beautiful and innocent men, women, and children met their Maker? How should I do it? And then she writes, after that I got up, straightened up, and went inside. Darkness and a strange suffocation pervaded, tension and the silence of the murder and death that rage there, and which now sleep together with the ashes of the victims in the mildew of the black beams, in an emptiness heavy with the weight of their endless suffering, permeated with the sighs of the dying. She was sitting outside, but then made a decision. I have to get up. I have to go forward. I have to go in. She continues in this account. I'm not going to read to you the whole one, but she says, after she came out of the gas chamber, she was sitting again by the side of the road. A group of tourists passed me by. As I sat on the side of the road, and the museum guard called to me, "Who did you lose here that you are crying like that?" That's what he thinks. Who did you lose here? She was a survivor of this camp. His voice rings in my ears. It reaches me from another world, from the land of the living, but I am with the image of my mother who was murdered here, with her shadow in an empty void, and perhaps also with my own death. What could I have answered him? They continue on their way, and I remain with my ghosts. I cannot contain it all, endure it all. I don't want to accept the reality at all. I only want to lie on this ground, to cover my eyes and to scream through the terrible tears which froze around me then and suddenly flow from me like boiling lava. It's good that no one sees my face covered with my hands. After that, I got up. I went into the gas chamber where I was held then an eternity ago for a whole night, and from where I went out the next morning because by chance they had run out of gas. People listened to the explanations of the guide spoken in many languages. I pushed myself forward in among them rudely and wildly. I stopped the guide in the midst of his words without apologizing, without permission. I stood in that chamber as if it belonged only to me. And I began to tell what happened there to us, how we felt, where we were brought from and under what conditions. I forced myself into someone else's words, into their souls, into their consciousness without asking me, or agreeing to listen. The burning torrent within me turned into a fountain of words drenched with tears and pain. Everyone wept. I heard loud breathing, the rustle of handkerchiefs. I myself did not look at anyone. Before my eyes, they could only see what I had been telling about in great agitation. I did not cry. I did not speak out of desperation. On the contrary, everything was normal for me during all those horrible years, and so it was now, when I suddenly found myself once again in this place, in the gas chamber. So I just told my story. But it sounded as if it were the voice of all those who had been there with me. You could see it in those who gathered around me, who listened to me attentively. There's that desire to lie on the ground. Cover your eyes. Put your fingers in your ears. There's that desire to go back to Mitzrayim. There's that desire to sit helplessly while you look upon tragic circumstances. But that's not the way we deal with fear. The way we deal with fear is by facing it and moving ourselves forward. We all have fears in life, and some of them may even be legitimate fears. Again, we all have fears because we're afraid of success, we're afraid of failure, or we're just afraid of ourselves. Because I just feel like a big nothing in life. But the only way to move forward, the only way to prevent yourself from living in the desert or chas v'shalom regressing to the midbar, is to bow your head and move forward, to plant the seed of potential into the fertile field. And if you have to water them with your tears, then do so. You know, there's an amazing medrash. The medrash in Yalkut Shimoni writes, Bisha shemelech hamoshiach ba. Such a beautiful medrash. When Mashiach will come, Omeid agag beis hamedrash. The Mashiach will stand on the rooftop of the Beis Hamikdash, V'mashmir lehem liYisrael va'omer. And the Mashiach will call out. He'll call out. He'll make an announcement. Va'omer anovim, humble ones. Higia zman gi'ulaschem. It is the time for your redemption. The time of your redemption has finally come near. And if you don't believe me, Re'u ba'ori shezarach aleichem. See the great light that is issuing forth. Shene'amar kumi ori. An incredible vision, right? Can you imagine the Mashiach is going to come? He's standing on the rooftop of the Beis Hamikdash and he's saying, humble ones, come and join me. Come and join me. The Geula has come. And if you don't believe me, see the incredible light that is coming off me. And it struck me, what do you mean if you don't believe me? How can you not believe Mashiach? First of all, it's Mashiach. Second of all, he's standing on the rooftop of the Beis Hamikdash. So what is it exactly that you're not going to believe in? Because you see, my friends, the Medrash is teaching us something amazing. There's fear even when Mashiach comes. Even when Mashiach comes, there will be those who are fearful to embrace him. Because again, either fear, because maybe I failed so many times in this world, I'm going to fail in the Messianic era as well. Fear because maybe I could actually be better in the Messianic era, but I don't want to create expectations. I mean, maybe there will be those who feel that they don't deserve Mashiach. They don't deserve redemption. So Mashiach has to call out to us and says, please, stop being afraid. Stop being afraid and just come to me. Just come to me. You've spent all of these years watering the seeds of potential with your tears. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. Just come. Stop being afraid and venture forward. The Dibna Magid tells of a mashal, of a man who once stole an item. And in the kingdom where he stole an item, the decree was death. Death. So the thief is being sentenced. He comes before the king. And the king says, here's your choice. We could hang you by this rope, short him the rope, or you could take whatever fate, lies behind that door. And he points to a door, and the door is ominous, metal, and a large chain, and a large lock. ominous. So the thief is like, I'll take the rope. Whatever is behind there, it can't be good. I'll take the rope. The king says, fine. They bring the thief to the gallows. They're putting the rope around his neck. And the thief says to the king, by the way, just out of curiosity, what's behind the door? And the king laughed. And he says, it's interesting. It's interesting. Anyone who I ever offer this choice to always chooses the rope. So the thief says, okay, but can you tell me what's behind the door? Obviously I'm not going to tell anyone. You're about to hang me over here. What's behind the door? And the king says, to tell you the truth, what's behind the door is the exit to the palace. Everyone who I give a choice between the rope and the door gets so scared off by the door that they choose the rope. But behind that door is the exit to freedom. How many times in life do we encounter circumstances that seem so scary, so we just turn the other way? We just choose the rope. We just go in a different direction. And isn't that the chait of Tisha B'Av? Isn't this the sin of the Meraglim? We say in Musaf, I'll share with you one last piece, then I'll conclude. We share in Musaf, it's really just struck me on Erev Tisha B'Av. We say in Musaf, on Yom Tiv, O mipnei chatainu galinu me'artzenu. Because of our sins, we have been exiled from our land. V'nisrachaknu me'al almasenu. We have been distanced from our soil. Ve'ein anachnu yecholim la'alos v'le'iraos v'lishtachos lefanecha. And as a result of our sins, as a result of the loss of the Beis HaMikdash, we can no longer go up to see and to prostrate ourselves before you. Or to perform our obligations in your home. Why were we exiled? So I'm sure you all know the Gemaras. The first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of idolatry, morality, bloodshed. The second Beis HaMikdash, sinas, china, baseless hatred. But that's not where it started. That's not where it started. Where did it start? It started on the 9th of Av, over 2,600 years ago. That fateful night when the Meraglim came back with their report, a disastrous report, a truthful but disastrous report, and instilled fear into the hearts of people to the point that they were no longer able to move forward. And all they could think about was either staying where they are or chas v'shalom going back to Mitzrayim. That's where it all started. Do you know what the greatest sin is? The greatest sin is not sinas chinam. And the greatest sin is not even avodah zarah, not even gilarayas, not even shvichus dam. Those are all terrible. You know what the greatest sin is? The greatest chait? The greatest chait is succumbing to your fears. Because if you succumb to your fears in life, you become a nothing. If you succumb to your fears in life, if you live life eyes closed, ears in your fingers, huddling beneath someone else, if you live with your fears, if you succumb to your fears and go back to your Egypt, that's the worst sin in life. Do you know why we lost everything? We lost everything because 2,600 years ago, last night, we succumbed to our fears. Instead of facing our fears and saying, yes, I'm so scared, but I'm not turning back, I'm moving forward. We succumb to our fears. Ve'ein anachnu yicholim la'asos chavosenu b'vis b'chirasecha. We can't fulfill our obligations. And my dear friends, what's our obligation? The greatest obligation in life is to become the best version of yourself. That is the core obligation we have. I don't have to become like you, and you don't have to become like me, but you have to become the best you, and I have to become the best me. And so we lament, because we succumbed to our fears. Galinu mi'artzenu. We were exiled, and therefore I can't fulfill the mission, my chov, of becoming the best version of myself. This is the tragedy of Tisha B'Av. The tragedy of Tisha B'Av is succumbing to your fears, is giving up, is regressing, is going back to Mitzrayim because you're too scared to confront what is in front of you. Therefore, the avodah of Tisha B'Av is an obligation to confront our fears. What's our avodah? You know, the fast is almost over. What is it? It's already 4 or 5. I'm sorry, I'm already going a little bit over. Fast is almost over. But have we accomplished what we needed to accomplish on this day? If we're in this predicament because our ancestors succumbed to their fears, then our avodah of this day is to overcome our fears. We're all fearful of something. We've let opportunities go because we're scared. We let relationships go because we're scared. We let careers go because we're scared. We let relationships with HaKadosh Baruch Hu go because we're scared of so much stuff. It's a scary world. It's a scary world. There's so much to be scared of. It's true. And we live in the middle of a pandemic. You know, I was thinking that as I was preparing this, I think we might be living through times. This is the first time in my life that I ever remember being scared of something. Like really scared of something. Of such an unknown. Even though everything's going to be fine. The world is not falling. The sky is not falling. But there's a pachad. There's a fear. There's a fear. And fear causes people to do all kinds of things. Our avodah on this Tisha B'Av is face your fears. What are you fearful of? And why are you fearful of it? What are you fearful of and why are you fearful of it? What are you fearful of? Ask yourself. Ask yourself, what can you be doing but holding your fears, holding you back? And why are you fearful of it? Is it because you're scared of failure? Is it because you're scared of success? Or is it because you just feel like a nothing? But Tisha B'Av is the day to face your fears. Tisha B'Av is the day to say the words of Kalev ben Yefuna. Alo na'ala v'yarashnu alsa ki achol nuchala. Tisha B'Av is the day where I say to myself, I can do it. I can do it. I have to go forward. I must move forward. I must find a way forward. I can't be paralyzed by my fear. Tisha B'Av is the day where I find the courage of Helena Berenbaum to get up, to get off the floor and to walk into that place which housed all of the ghosts of my past, present, and future. Where I get up the ground, and I walk forward. Where I push myself to the front of the room because that's where I need to be. Tisha B'Av is the day of Hazorim Bidima Berina Yiktsoru. Tisha B'Av is the day where we take the seeds of potential. Each of us has a bag of seeds. Those are the seeds I want to accomplish. The seeds, those are the seeds of accomplishment. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, but they're sitting in my pocket because I'm too afraid to plant them. Why am I too afraid to plant them? Because maybe there's not going to be enough water, or enough sunshine, or perfect climate, or enough wind. So I hold these seeds of potential, these seeds of dreams and aspirations, and I hold them in my pocket. And some people are born with a bag of seeds, and they die with the same bag of seeds. And so Tisha B'Av is the day where I say, you know what, I'm tired of always schlepping the seeds. I'm going to find the courage to plant them. But there might not be enough water. If there's not enough water, I'll figure out a way to water them. And if I have to water them with my tears, I'll water them with my tears, because I know that if I find the courage to plant the seeds of my goals and aspirations in the ground, Havzorim bedima, barina yiktsoru. If I find the courage to plant the seeds in fertile soil, even if I have to water them with my tears, ultimately, I will reap and harvest them with incredible joy. This is our avodah on Tisha B'Av. We cried today because our ancestors succumbed to their fears so many thousands of years ago. May we be Zochem Yirtz Hashem, that on this day of Tisha B'Av, which has so much holiness, because as we saw before, the holiness of these days, remember, today was supposed to be Yom Kippur. Today was supposed to be Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, ki b'yom hazeh yechaper aleichem l'tareschem miktoch hatosechem. You know what Yom Kippur is? The greatest gift. The gift of a new beginning. Today was supposed to be Yom Kippur. And if today was supposed to be Yom Kippur, that means the power of a new beginning is still embedded in this day. We just have to find the courage to take advantage of it. Let's stop carrying the seeds of dreams, aspiration, and potential and start planting them. I know it's scary. It's scary for all of us. But let's confront our fears, embrace our fears, and move through our fears. And if we do that, if we all plant our seeds today and water them with our tears, if we find the courage to do something that our ancestors, the Meraglim, could not do, which was face their fears, then hopefully we will be Zochem Yirtz Hashem, that this will be the last Tisha B'Av of mourning. That Amir Hashem, in the coming days, will be Zocha to see Geula, to see redemption. We'll be Zocha to hear the Mashiach standing on top of the Beis HaMikdash, and when he says, come, 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 we'll be ready to go because we will no longer have fear. If we each find the courage to face our fears, plant our seeds, use today as a new beginning because it's really supposed to be Yom Kippur. There's no telling what we can do, no telling what we could accomplish. I'm tired of mourning and of crying on this day. I have been doing it for too many years. May we each be zoche to do our part, to actualize the holiness of this day, the light of this day. May our individual efforts combine and create a great burst of national light. And may that national light illuminate the world, pave the way for the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, our return to Eretz Yisrael, with the Melech HaMashiach Mihira B'Yameinu. Amen. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habenuya.